You are not weak. You are at the edge. And not because you were not built for this, but because friction always gets loud right before something breaks open. So now you are staring at the exit. You are trying to make quitting sound reasonable. You are telling yourself maybe this is wisdom. Maybe this is maturity. Maybe this is just you finally accepting reality. But deep down, something in you knows this is not clarity. This is collapse talking. Today, I am giving you a 72-hour stabilization plan to secure your breakthrough without burning out. Because some of you are not standing at the end. You are standing in the 11th hour. And the 11th hour is dangerous because it does not look heroic when you are inside it. It looks ugly, messy, uninspiring. You are exhausted, overstimulated, emotionally thin. You have been carrying more than people know. More pressure, more decision fatigue, more silent disappointment, more private fear than you ever said out loud. And now the mind starts doing something predictable. It starts looking for relief. Not truth, relief. That is why the urge to quit can feel so convincing in this phase. Because it is not always coming from discernment. It is often coming from depletion. You are lying in bed, but not resting. You are sitting in front of the laptop rereading the same line 5 times and still not absorbing it. You are opening your inbox and instantly feeling your chest tighten. You are staring at your calendar like it personally betrayed you. You are answering people in shorter sentences because you no longer have enough internal bandwidth to make yourself sound okay. That is not random. That is the breaking point beginning to show itself in your body before your mouth fully admits it. So let me ask you something directly. What were you about to give up on today? Not what frustrated you, not what annoyed you. What were you about to abandon? The project, the launch, the job search, the business, the program, the creative work? The version of your future that started feeling too expensive to keep carrying? What was it? Because naming it matters. When a person reaches the edge, they start talking vaguely. They say things like, I'm just tired. I don't know if this is worth it. Maybe I should just stop. But underneath vague language, there is usually one specific thing on the chopping block. One thing the mind is trying to sacrifice to reduce the pressure. And if you do not identify it clearly, you will make permanent decisions inside temporary exhaustion. That is where people do damage they regret later. They do not quit because they no longer care. They quit because they can no longer think cleanly inside depletion. And this is the twist. Friction peaks right before the finish line. That is one of the least glamorous truths about success. People imagine breakthrough as a clean upward climb. They imagine momentum, confidence, certainty, visible progress, reinforcement. Sometimes it looks like that from the outside. But from the inside, a lot of breakthroughs come wrapped in maximum resistance, maximum self-doubt, maximum mental noise, maximum temptation to walk away. Because right before something stabilizes, it often destabilizes first. Right before a system reorganizes, it shakes. Right before a result lands, your capacity gets tested at the exact point where you are least interested in being tested. That is the 11th hour. Not when things are impossible. When they are possible enough to threaten the old version of you. That is why this phase feels so psychologically violent. You have already invested too much to feel casual. You have not yet seen enough to feel safe. So now you are trapped between effort and evidence. Between sacrifice and reward. Between, I have come too far to stop, and I do not know if I can keep going. That in-between place breaks a lot of people. Not because they are untalented. Because they misread the symptoms. They think the breaking point means the dream is wrong. Sometimes it just means the pressure is peaking. And if you know that, you stop treating every panic signal as prophecy. Let us name the symptoms clearly. Because once you can name them, you stop obeying them blindly. The symptoms of the breaking point often look like this. Sudden emotional numbness towards something you care deeply about 2 weeks ago. An intense urge to cancel, withdraw, ghost, or disappear. A strange fantasy about starting over somewhere else instead of finishing what is in front of you. Overreacting to small setbacks because your system has no cushion left. Reading one disappointing message and feeling like your whole future is collapsing. Feeling weirdly angry at people who need normal things from you because you are already carrying too much silently. Losing perspective. Everything starts feeling final. Everything starts sounding absolute. One delay means nothing is working. One mistake means I always do this. One hard day means maybe this whole thing was wrong. That is the recap. Emotional numbness, escape fantasies, overreaction, totalizing thoughts. That is the breaking point language. And when it shows up, you need to understand something critical. Your perception is not clean in this state. That does not mean your pain is fake. It means your conclusion-making ability is compromised. There is a difference. Some of you are trying to evaluate your whole future from the floor of a nervous system crash. Of course, everything looks darker from there. Of course, quitting starts sounding holy. Of course, relief starts disguising itself as wisdom. But relief and truth are not the same thing. That is why this video exists. Not to hype you, to stabilize you. Because once you understand the psychology of the 11th hour, the next question becomes very practical. Where is the collapse actually coming from? Because sometimes the issue is not that you are doing too much. It is that your supply lines are broken. This is where people get stuck. They say, I'm overwhelmed, as if overwhelm is one giant mystery. But overwhelm usually has structure. It has leak points. It has drains. It has places where your energy, attention, and emotional steadiness are bleeding out faster than you can replenish them. And if you do not identify those drains, you will keep trying to push through a system that is losing resources by the hour. Think of it like a leaky bucket. That mini example matters because it is simple and true. You keep pouring energy in, coffee, motivation, time blocks, pep talks, discipline, another late night, another push. Another promise to yourself that tomorrow you will do better, but the bucket is leaking. So no matter how much effort you pour in, the system never actually fills. That is what some of you are living inside right now. You are not lacking effort, you are leaking stability. And until you find the holes, more effort will just feel insulting. So let me ask you this clearly. Where is your energy bleeding out? Not where are you busy? Where are you bleeding? Is it indecision? Switching tasks every 20 minutes and ending the day feeling like you worked non-stop but moved nothing meaningful? Is it emotional labor? Spending your best mental energy managing other people's moods, expectations, questions, or disappointments before you even get to your own work? Is it digital overload? Opening one message and somehow ending up mentally scattered across 10 different conversations, 5 tabs, 3 apps, and 0 real progress? Is it hidden resentment? Doing things you said yes to but no longer have the capacity for, then wondering why your main goal feels heavier every day? Is it perfectionism? Turning simple tasks into emotional marathons because you keep trying to get them perfect instead of getting them done? These are supply line issues, and supply line issues create false narratives. You start saying, I'm losing passion. No, sometimes you are just bleeding energy through too many invisible holes. You start saying, maybe I don't want this anymore. No. Sometimes you are just trying to pursue something important through a system that has become mechanically unsustainable. This is why the next truth matters so much. You are not doing too much. You are doing the wrong things. That is the twist. Because most people in crisis think the answer is purely rest. And sometimes rest is part of it. But often the deeper issue is misallocated force. Too much effort going into maintenance instead of movement. Too much energy going into noise instead of the needle-moving task. Too much responsiveness. Too much reactivity. Too much trying to keep every plate spinning because dropping one plate feels irresponsible. Even if carrying all of them is destroying the thing that matters most, this is where you have to get honest. Some of you are not exhausted by your main goal. You are exhausted by everything surrounding it. The random obligations, the constant availability, the emotional clutter, the unnecessary tasks that let you feel productive without actually creating progress, the meetings that drain clarity, the checking, switching, answering, smoothing, organizing, and over-managing that eats your best hours alive. Then, by the time you reach the work that matters, you have nothing clean left to give. And that is when the lie enters. I guess I just can't do this. No, maybe you just spent all your ammunition before reaching the actual battle. That is why identifying the supply lines is not optional. It is survival. You need to know what is feeding you, what is draining you, and what is pretending to be necessary while quietly stealing your breakthrough. Pay attention to your actual day, not your idealized version, your actual day. What immediately fragments your attention? What conversations leave you mentally foggy? What tasks create motion but no meaningful traction? What people, apps, commitments, and habits keep eating the exact energy your real work needs? What do you still call in responsibility that is actually leakage? Because some of you do not need more motivation. You need fewer leaks. You do not need to become stronger before tomorrow. You need to stop handing your last clean energy to things that do not deserve it. That is what stabilization begins with, not inspiration. Triage. And once you see the leaks clearly, the next move becomes obvious. You do not make another dramatic decision. You freeze the battlefield. That is where we go next. This is where you stop trying to think your way out of collapse and start stabilizing your system. Because when you are in the 11th hour, the worst thing you can do is keep making permanent decisions from a temporary nervous system emergency. That is why the next move is not push harder. It is the 72-hour freeze. And I need you to hear that phrase the right way. Freeze does not mean quit. Freeze does not mean disappear. Freeze means you stop the bleed long enough to get your mind back. You suspend any move that could damage your future while your internal state is compromised. That is power. That is maturity. That is the opposite of panic. Because some of you are one impulsive email away from sabotaging something you actually still want. One exhausted conversation away from ending a partnership, walking away from a project, burning a bridge, or deleting work you are going to wish you had kept. That is why Rule 1 is simple. No major decisions. That is the recap. No quitting. No dramatic exits. No emotional resignations. No deleting the whole plan at 2 in the morning because one hard week made everything feel cursed. Nothing permanent for 72 hours. Why? Because crisis shrinks perspective. When your system is overloaded, everything feels final. Everything feels bigger, darker, heavier, more hopeless than it actually is. That does not mean your pain is fake. It means your lens is distorted. And distorted lenses should not be trusted with irreversible decisions. You do not let a storm redesign your life. You let the storm pass first. Then you assess the damage with clear eyes. That is the freeze. It is a bridge, a protected window between emotional collapse and unnecessary destruction. And some of you need that more than encouragement right now. You need structure. Because once a person reaches this edge, they stop trusting small actions. They think only a big dramatic move will create relief. Quit. Leave. Start over. Burn it down. Ghost everyone. Move away. Delete the project. Tell everybody you are done. That impulse is not always truth. Sometimes it is just the nervous system begging for one thing: less pressure. And there are safer ways to get that. This is why the first thing you freeze is decision-making. The second thing you freeze is unnecessary responsiveness. This matters because when people are overwhelmed, they keep trying to be available. They keep answering things they do not need to answer. Keep opening the inbox. Keep checking messages. Keep saying yes to small requests while their whole internal structure is barely holding. Then they wonder why the body keeps screaming. Of course it does. You are trying to stop a crash while keeping every door open. That cannot work. So ask yourself honestly, can you let the emails wait? Can you let the non-urgent requests sit? Can you let one day pass without performing availability for people who are not carrying what you are carrying? Some of you need permission to do that. You are so used to being responsive that delay feels irresponsible. But in a crisis, over-responsiveness is sabotage. You do not owe instant access while your system is failing. You owe yourself stabilization first. And yes, that will feel uncomfortable. Because once you stop reacting to everything, you will notice how addicted your mind became to constant incoming noise. You will reach for the phone, reach for the inbox, reach for the app, reach for the app, reach for the next update. Not because any of it is urgent, because urgency became your normal. And the freeze interrupts that addiction. This is why some of you need to physically reduce access for 72 hours. Close tabs, silence notifications, delay replies, move the phone across the room, strip the field down, because every unnecessary input is taking cognitive blood from a system already in distress. This is triage, not lifestyle optimization. Triage. And then comes something a lot of high-functioning people resist. Forced rest, not aspirational rest. Not the kind where you say, I should rest, while still scrolling, thinking, checking, and bracing. Actual interruption. A forced nap. That mini example matters because exhausted people always think they are too busy to pause. And that is exactly why they need to. Some of you have gone past normal tired. You are in decision fatigue, adrenal fatigue, nervous system static, the kind of exhaustion where your body may look upright, but your mind is no longer processing accurately. That is when a forced nap becomes strategic, not childish. Strategic, 20 minutes, 40 minutes. Even lying down in a dark room without input counts if sleep does not come, because what you are doing is telling the system, you are safe enough to stand down for a moment. And for some of you, that moment changes the whole tone of the day, not because a nap solves your life, because it breaks the momentum of collapse. It interrupts the chemical story that everything is urgent, everything is burning, everything depends on your constant vigilance. That interruption matters a lot. The 72-hour freeze is not about fixing the whole crisis in one move. It is about creating enough internal space that your mind can stop lying to you. That is the goal. And once the system starts calming, you move to the next phase, deploying reinforcements, because this is another place people break. They try to survive the crisis alone. They tell themselves they just need to be stronger, smarter, more disciplined, more private, more self-contained. No, independence in the crisis is arrogance. That is the twist. And I want to be careful with that word, but it matters. Because some people call it independence when really it is fear of being seen in need. Fear of inconvenience. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of having to admit, I am not managing this well right now. So they isolate. They hide the strain. They keep saying, I'm good. They keep acting normal. They keep performing control while their inner world is already smoking. And then they collapse harder because the load was never meant to be carried alone at this stage. This does not mean tell everyone everything. It means identify safe reinforcements, not spectators, not curious people, not people who make your pain about them. Safe reinforcements, people who can help stabilize rather than intensify, people who can hold simple truth without turning it into drama, people who can support action, not just witness distress. This is where a lot of you need to be more selective, because not all help is help. Some people hear that you are struggling and immediately flood you with opinions. Some minimize, some panic. Some give you 20 ideas when what you needed was one calm sentence. Some secretly enjoy your vulnerability because it makes them feel stronger. Those are not reinforcements. Those are additional drains. So how do you ask for help safely? Keep it clear. Keep it specific. Keep it actionable. That is the recap, not a full life story. Not a chaotic emotional download to 10 random people. Specific support from 1 or 2 safe humans. And this is where the SOS text message becomes powerful. Short, clean, grounded. Something like, I'm at my limit and I need a stabilizing voice, not solutions. Are you available for a 10-minute call today? Or I'm overloaded and trying not to make a bad decision. Can I borrow your calm for a few minutes? Or, I'm in a rough window. I don't need fixing, I just need help staying steady for the next day or two. That kind of text does 2 important things. First, it tells the truth. Second, it gives direction. You are not just saying, help. You are saying what kind of help. That matters because vague distress can create messy support. Clear requests create usable support. And some of you need practical reinforcements, not just emotional ones. Someone to help you sort tasks. Someone to hold one responsibility temporarily. Someone to sit with you while you send the one email you have been avoiding. Someone to remind you what is actually urgent and what only feels urgent. Someone to bring food, watch kids, check in, or say, go sleep, I've got this one. Do not underestimate how stabilizing small practical help can be when the system is in overload, because crisis makes everything feel equally important. Reinforcement helps reintroduce hierarchy, and hierarchy is calming. Now we know what matters first. Now we know what can wait. Now the battlefield is not everywhere. And that matters more than motivation in this phase. Some of you are not missing courage. You are missing containment. That is why support matters. Not as dependency, as infrastructure. A bridge does not apologize for needing support beams. Neither should you. And sometimes the help you need is not another person. Sometimes reinforcement is environmental. A cleaner room. A simpler desk, a meal you do not have to think about, a written list instead of holding 14 tasks in your head, a whiteboard that shows the next 3 steps, a a literal glass of water next to you because your body has been running on cortisol and caffeine and calling that determination. Do not spiritualize what is partly physiological. Sometimes the mind feels hopeless because the body is underfed, underslept, overstimulated, and chemically flooded. That does not explain everything, but it explains enough that you should respect it. And the 72-hour stabilization plan respects it. You are not trying to become superhuman. You are trying to become steady enough not to destroy what still matters to you. That is different. So let us put this face together clearly. For 72 hours, no major decisions. Reduce responsiveness. Interrupt collapse with actual rest. Ask for specific support from safe people. Create practical reinforcement where possible. That is how the system starts coming back online. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough for the next move. Enough to begin reclaiming agency instead of being dragged around by exhaustion. And that is exactly where we go next. Now the goal is no longer just to stop the crash. It is to recover your position inside it. Because one of the most dangerous things about the 11th hour is not just the exhaustion. It is the story exhaustion starts telling. The story that says this is proof. Proof that you are not built for it. Proof that you misjudged yourself. Proof that this goal costs too much. Proof that quitting is finally the responsible thing. And when a person has been depleted long enough, those stories start sounding holy. They sound wise, measured, adult, but a lot of quitting impulses are not clarity. They are emotional exhaustion, asking for an exit. So let me ask you something directly. Is your desire to quit actually discernment? Or is it just exhaustion in a persuasive voice? That question matters because fatigue is an excellent liar. Fatigue makes short-term relief feel morally correct. Fatigue turns "I need a pause" into "I need to abandon the whole thing." Fatigue turns "this system is unstable" into "this dream was wrong." Fatigue turns "I need support" into "I'm clearly not capable." That is why reclaiming agency is not about pretending you feel strong. It is about separating facts from collapsed language. Because right now, some of you are narrating your life from the floor instead of from truth, and the floor has terrible perspective. From the floor, everything looks permanent. From the floor, one hard week becomes a doomed future. From the floor, one delayed result becomes evidence that none of it is working. From the floor, quitting looks clean because you are only imagining the relief of stopping, not the grief that follows after you recover and realize you left something that still mattered. That is why the first part of reclaiming agency is narrative control, not fake positivity, not pretending the pressure is not real, but refusing to let exhaustion write the final interpretation. You say, "This is a breaking point, not a prophecy. This is a nervous system event, not necessarily a life conclusion. This is pressure peaking, not proof that I was wrong to come this far." That is the recap. Breaking point, not prophecy. Nervous system event, not final truth. Pressure peak, not automatic proof. And I want you to hear the next line the right way. You survived 100% of your worst days. That is the twist. Not because survival automatically means everything was beautiful. Not because endurance is the same as healing, but because your mind, in crisis, acts like the current moment is uniquely unsurvivable. It starts talking as if this is the one thing you cannot get through. The one wall you cannot outlast. The one pressure point that finally means you are done. But that is not what your life has shown. Your life has shown something else. You have been here before in different forms, different pain, different fear, different season, but still an edge, still a night where you thought, "I don't know how I'm going to carry tomorrow." Still a moment where your body felt heavy, your mind felt loud, and your future felt unstable. And yet you moved through it, not always gracefully, not always quickly. But you move through it, that matters, because memory is medicine in a crisis, not nostalgia. Evidence that the current feeling does not get to claim absolute authority. So when the voice says you can't do this, you answer, "I have already done hard things in states I once thought would break me." When the voice says this is the end, you answer, "No, this is a familiar kind of threshold." When the voice says, "You have no capacity left," you answer, "I may be depleted, but depleted is not the same as finished." That is how agency starts coming back. Through language, through orientation, through refusing to let the most exhausted version of you become the only narrator in the room. And then you move to the next layer, reframing the story of where you actually are. Some of you are calling this a failure phase. It is not. It is a compression phase, a threshold phase, a high friction phase. Those are different. Failure says nothing meaningful is happening here. Threshold says something is trying to shift and the pressure is part of the shift. That is important because the meaning you assign to pain changes how long you can stay with it. Pain with no meaning feels cruel. Pain with context becomes more bearable. Not easy. Bearable. And what if the context here is not that you are falling apart? What if the context is that your system is trying to reorganize at the exact point where your old methods no longer work and your new capacity is still forming? What if this is the point where you stop trying to brute force your way to the finish line and learn how to cross it with structure instead? That is a different narrative. That puts you back in relationship with the process instead of underneath it. And once agency starts returning, something subtle changes. You feel less helpless, not because all the stress disappears, because now the stress is not the only thing speaking. You have your own voice back. Now you can say, for the next 72 hours, I am not allowed to interpret my whole future through exhaustion. For the next 72 hours, I am allowed to stabilize before I decide. For the next 72 hours, I do not need to become brilliant again. I only need to become steady enough to keep the bridge intact. That is agency. And it leads directly into the final phase, crossing the threshold. Because if you stay with the process long enough, something does begin to shift. Not always dramatically at first, often subtly. A clearer morning, a calmer nervous system, one task completed that seemed impossible yesterday, a little less panic, a little more order, a little more ability to see what actually matters. That is the beginning of momentum returning. It is like a stuck engine finally turning over, not roaring yet, but no longer dead. That is why the sudden momentum shift catches people off guard. That mini example matters because after enough pressure, people forget how quickly things can change once the internal state stabilizes. One good night of sleep, one honest conversation, one cleared task list, one quiet morning without reactive chaos, one right move, and suddenly the whole emotional weather shifts. Not because the world transformed overnight, because the system stopped fighting itself long enough to move again. This is what many people miss. The breakthrough is not always hiding in more force. Sometimes it is hiding on the other side of stabilization, on the other side of not quitting in the worst emotional window, on the other side of giving the system 3 days of structure instead of 1 more hour of panic. So ask yourself this honestly. How will tomorrow feel if you quit today? Not tonight, tomorrow. When the chemistry settles a little, when the emotional spike comes down, when the immediate relief of "I'm done" starts fading. How will it feel to know you made a permanent decision from a temporary collapse? How will it feel if what you really needed was stabilization, but what you chose was abandonment? Because this is the hidden heartbreak of the 11th hour. Sometimes people do not lose because the dream was wrong. They lose because they walked away in the exact window where their perception was least trustworthy. That is why you must protect yourself from your own exhausted urgency. And then comes the final twist. The test is over. The reward is next. Not because every hard thing instantly pays off, not because every struggle guarantees a visible breakthrough on a perfect schedule, but because there is a real pattern here. Maximum pressure often comes right before release, not always because the universe is romantic. Sometimes because that is how systems work. Compression, destabilization, reorganization, movement. And if you know that, you stop misreading the compression as the end of the story. You start treating it as a threshold. That does not mean you glorify suffering. It means you contextualize it. You do not let the hardest 48 hours of a season convince you that the whole season was wrong. You do not let one collapse window rob the months or years that brought you here. You cross, carefully, slowly if needed, but you cross. That is what this plan is for. Not just to keep you alive emotionally, to get you over the threshold without setting your future on fire during the panic. So let us bring the whole plan together. When the 11th hour hits, first name it. This is a breaking point, not necessarily a final truth. Second, identify the leaks. Find where your energy, attention, and steadiness are bleeding out. Third, activate the 72-hour freeze. No major decisions. No unnecessary responsiveness. No dramatic exits. Fourth, deploy reinforcements. Specific help. Safe people. Practical support. Real rest. Fifth, reclaim narrative control. Do not let exhaustion interpret your whole life. And finally, cross the threshold. Stay long enough for the chemistry to change. Stay long enough for momentum to return. Stay long enough to see whether this was actually an end or simply the final test before movement. That is the crisis stabilization checklist. Not glamorous, but powerful. Because some seasons are not won by brilliance. They are won by refusing to self-destruct in the final stretch. You do not need a perfect plan tonight. You do not need to love the process tonight. You do not need to feel inspired tonight. You just need to not abandon what still matters because your body and mind are sounding alarms at the same time. So hear this clearly. You are not weak. You are not crazy for feeling close to the edge. You are not failing because quitting suddenly sounds seductive. You are in the 11th hour, and the 11th hour is loud. But it is not always final. Sometimes it is the last violent shaking before the door opens. Sometimes it is the point where your old way of carrying things dies so a steadier way can take its place. Sometimes it is the exact place where people mistake pressure for prophecy and leave right before the shift. Do not do that. Not tonight. Give yourself 72 hours. Protect the bridge. Stop the bleed. Call in reinforcement. Let the chemistry come down. Let the mind clear. Let tomorrow arrive before you decide whether today was truth or just exhaustion in a sharp voice. And if this gave language to the edge you are standing on right now, stay with the plan. You do not need to see the whole breakthrough tonight. You only need to survive the breaking point without turning it into the end of your story.